Hi there, it's Jenna from scribblinggrace.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to paint a watercolor waterfall in my journaling Bible. This one, I start off by sketching out my waterfall, and you can see the very faint lines from my pencil. I wanted to keep them faint so that when I put my watercolor on, you won't be able to see the pencil underneath it, because you won't be able to erase the pencil after you put the watercolor on top of it. So just really lightly, I drew out kind of a guideline to what I wanted my waterfall to look like. So I didn't videotape that part, and I know that sketching out things can be really hard, and it's hard for me too. I'm just practicing and going with it. But I did use my little iPad to draw out a really rough, basic sketch of what I did for my sketch, and I will put that as a free printable in the blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor-waterfall. And it'll be easy, quick download, no signups or anything necessary because it's a really simple little printable. But if you feel like you have no artistic skill, no drawing skill, no sketching skill at all, I think that it could be really helpful for you. So you can just use that little printable as your sketch guide, and then just either copy that onto your Bible journaling page with a pencil, or you can just use it underneath the page that you're working on, and the line should kind of show through, so you don't even need to use a pencil if you don't have to. So while I'm not showing that on video, I just would encourage you to check that out if you feel like you need a little extra help and don't want to sketch out this waterfall yourself. So I am painting. So I am using my Kuretake Gansatambi watercolor set, and I picked out some dark green colors and a couple darker blue colors. I'll try to find the exact names to the colors that I used, and I'll put that link or those names in the blog post. And again, I'll put that link to the blog post in the description below. It's at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor-waterfall also. So that's where you can find all the links to supplies that I use and all the helpful information that you need to create a page just like this. So I am starting off painting my waterfall doing the rocks first. I just found it kind of easiest to do it that way. Though this is my first time painting a waterfall too, so I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. But I basically am just kind of adding in some colors. So I wanted to keep the bottoms of the rocks where the water's hitting it darkest, and then the lighter parts of the rocks were going to be away from the waterfall, and the top parts of the rock. So you get each of my little like half circles and circle-y shapes are their own separate rock. So I'm starting off by just using a pretty good amount of water and just a touch of pigment, and a little bit of the greenish color, a little bit of blue maybe, to kind of create a greenish gray. And basically I just kind of used this dark gray blue color that I have in my watercolor set. It's one of my favorite colors. It's kind of that gives you a gray. It's a blue gray. It's really dark. So that's what I'm using to add that shadow at the bottom section of my rocks. And basically I just won't wash out my brush fully before picking up a green color. So then that way it gives me a little bit of green, but also that grayish tone to the top parts of my rock. So I'll paint the circle first in my rock, and then add in a little bit more touch of color where I feel like I want it, and add in that shadow of just that dark gray blue color. That's really what it's called, dark gray blue. So, and I'm just, when I add in that shadow, I am just picking up a little bit of water and a lot of pigment, so it's really pigmented, and just touching that into the bottom section of my rock. And then that way it both defines the rocks themselves and it adds a lot of depth to it, rather than just having one straight color. And it helps to define those rocks from each other as well. So it's really rather simple. It sounds really complicated, but I'm keeping this all real time so that hopefully it's helpful for you. You can also see that I'm adding in some leaves here, or bushes, because of course I don't want just rocks. I want some life and greenery to it also. And I'm not doing any specific bush shape, I'm really just using the very tip of my paintbrush. It's just a small round paintbrush, and just painting in little swipes up and down mostly, to create kind of the look of a bush. And I want them to be kind of wild looking, so some are going straight out into the waterfall, some are going out towards the page. I wanted to keep this mostly in the margins, just so that I could read all the text, and also it's a little bit easier to work in a smaller space. So since this is my first watercolor, or my first waterfall, I figured that I would try to just do it in a small version, and I really love how it turned out in the end. So as you can see, I'm working pretty slowly. And I'm just adding in colors where I feel it's necessary. One of the great things about watercolor is that it works really well to add layers. So if you don't fully feel like your rock blended perfectly, you can just add in a little bit more color on top of that, to help blend it in. You can add a lot of depth and a lot of character to your watercolor paintings by just working in layers. And just adding in darker colors. I always say start with your lighter color first and then add in the darker color. Another great thing about watercolor is that it is easier to remove color than other paints like acrylics. So it's easy because say you added a little bit too much color, you can just pick it back up with your paper towel before it dries, and then you get a nice, more blended, muted color. So here I am just adding a few more rocks at the bottom. And though I am going over the text a little bit, I'm trying to just let it kind of blend into the page. So I'm leaving that edge towards the text unfinished. And I really like how that ended up. Instead of painting rocks all across the page, I felt like that would be a little bit too busy. And to keep that unfinished edge, but also kind of blend those rocks so that it's not just like a cut off of the rocks, I decided to take that gray-blue color and just add it kind of at that side, that left side of those rocks towards the text, and just blend that in with a good amount of water, and then that kind of just helps it to stay cohesive and blend more into the text. You can see I just picked up a little bit of that color with a paper towel that got a little bit too dark, and I'm really happy with how these rocks turned out. So now I'm going to start adding my water. And so I'm using I believe this is cerulean blue. Please don't hurt me. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's a bright blue color. And I'm going to start, I'm trying to kind of create a curve at the top part where my waterfall is, and that'll just help to give me that image of the flowing water curving down the edge where that waterfall is coming over. So the key thing about painting the blue water is that I want the edges to be darker than like the middle. So again, just like I wanted the part where my rocks touch the water to be darker, I also want my water, the part where my water is touching the rocks, to be darker, because the rocks are kind of casting a shadow over the water, if that makes sense. So this part really is not very technical. You really just want to get paint on the page, and I really believe that with watercolor, any way that you get the paint on the page is going to look really pretty. So I kind of feel like no matter what blue colors you use, however you do it, it's going to look pretty good. The thing that's really going to start making this look like a waterfall is when we add the white paint after we do the blue, and that'll start making it look more like a waterfall. So right now we're just trying to get those base blues down. I do want to note that I'm leaving a little gap of white from where my waterfall meets the river. So basically where that waterfall is casting a big splash, I'm going to leave that part white. And in a little bit, I'm going to add white to really make this look like a waterfall. So I'm going to add more white into that white space that I'm leaving and things. But for now, I'm just going to continue painting in, and you don't necessarily have to leave that little white space either, but it just makes it a little bit easier. So now I'm adding in a darker blue color. I believe this is indigo, and I'm just continuing to add in colors to my waterfall until I feel like it covers the page like I want it to. And I'm not worrying too much about it being totally perfect either. I really do feel like the beauty of watercolor is that however you get it on the page, it's going to look really pretty. So again, trying to do some darker, more pigmented spots towards the edge, towards my rocks, so that it looks like there's some shadow being cast onto them. But again, have fun with it. We don't need to make it totally perfect. I have a lot of practice with watercolor, but this is my first waterfall, and I feel like the more I practice this, the more amazing it's going to get. And so I just enjoyed the process, and I really feel like when you enjoy the process, it turns out a lot better too. So I'm just kind of dabbing in a little bit extra color here into the waterfall part and the river part, just trying to add a little bit of fun depth to the water. So I'm drying what I have so far, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the sky portion, and I'm using that same dark blue-gray color. And still my small round paintbrush, lots of water this time and less pigment, so that it's nice and diluted and light, kind of just giving me that nice blue-gray sky. And I decided to go around the text at first, and then later on you'll see I quickly add in a tiny bit more of the same pigment to the rest of my page surrounding my waterfall. Mainly because once this portion here was dry, it was all wrinkly, and then the part where the text is, it was really straight, and I don't mind a wrinkly page at all. I kind of love it. But I don't like the two different textures on my page. So adding the water onto the rest of the page just helps to even out that texture. And then also I felt like it just finished the page up, adding the paint onto the text as well. And you can still read the text underneath the paint. As long as the colors are light, you can still read it. So that's a question I get asked a lot as well. But that's also a personal decision. So if you don't want to go over the text at all, you don't have to. So now I'm just drying my page again with the heat gun. It just helps to dry the page really quickly, but you could also air dry it. And then I'm going to add a little bit more detail with my green. This is olive green to my bushes. Just again, using that tip of my paintbrush to just add little stripes into a shape of a bush. And I add a little bit more at the bottom, and then some grassy bits at the bottom to help tie that whole part together. And that's it for the painting portion of this page pretty much. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the white detailing to really make this look like a waterfall. So when I was doing research to try to figure out how to paint a waterfall, I watched a ton of watercolor tutorials on YouTube. And pretty much all of them use masking fluid. So basically you apply masking fluid. It's kind of like a rubber cement type of thing. And you apply it either using a paintbrush or a masking fluid pen, and then you paint on top of it once it's dry, and then you can rub the masking fluid away and it reveals the white page underneath, the original white page. So it's a really common in the Bible or in the watercolor community to use masking fluid to create those white spaces. And it's kind of frowned upon to use white paint. But we're just Bible journaling, and we're not being professional, and we don't need to be professional, so we don't need to do anything super fancy like masking fluid. And honestly, I was going to use masking fluid, but I couldn't find mine, and I didn't want to spend the money on some more, and I had a white paint pen, and I figured that'll be so much easier, and because masking fluid can be tricky to use, and so I figured just using a white pen just simplifies the whole process way more. And since we're just Bible journaling, it doesn't need to be super fancy professional type of art. We can use the paint. We can use the white paint. We don't have to feel guilty about using the white paint. So anyways, I'll jump off my soapbox there. But I'm basically just using this white paint pen. You could also use white acrylic paint and a paintbrush if you don't have a paint pen. You could use Sharpie as well, but I really love my Uniposca paint pen. It's the best paint pen that I have been able to find. And this is the extra fine tip. And basically what I'm doing is I'm adding in where I want the flow of the water to be, but also where I want like the splashes to be. So you can see that section in between that I left white earlier, that section between where the waterfall hits the river, and it's creating that big splash. So that's where I'm just scribbled with my paint pen to create kind of the look of a splash. And then I also created kind of two V shapes up at the very top of the waterfall to kind of create the idea of water pouring over where the light might be hitting it. And I'm also just giving that illusion with that white paint pen of the water flowing over with those, just the scribbly lines that I'm drawing in. And here I'm just adding some more to the river to try to create a look of that flowing water. Also where my water is hitting the rocks, I just scribbled in a little bit of that white as well. And it's really not fancy. I'm really just using that paint pen to scribble around to create kind of the idea of that water splashing it. And I felt like I might have gotten a little carried away with the white. So then I ended up going back over some of the spots where I added that white paint pen to kind of dull it down a little bit. And I was so happy with this end product. I felt like it looks defined, especially when you look like farther away from it. It looks really cool. As you get closer up, you can see the imperfections. But again, we're just Bible journaling. It doesn't need to be totally perfect. So here I am adding in just a little bit of that, a little bit darker shadow, and trying to dull down the white a little bit. And that's it for the painting part of my page. I'm just going to dry it again with my heat gun to make sure it's really nice and dry before I add a little bit of lettering. If you stuck with me this far, man, I know this video is a longer one than I normally do, but I really wanted to make sure that it's approachable and I explained it well enough that you could do it yourself. So I totally forgot to mention the verse that I'm working on, which is John 7, verses 37 through 38, which says, "On the last day of the feast of the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, 'If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of flowing water,'" or rivers of living water. Yeah, I just really love that verse, and I thought a waterfall would be a really perfect way to depict that to me. So now I'm just adding my lettering, and so from those verses, I decided to write out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. And so I decided to keep my lettering super duper simple today. One of the things I get asked a lot is about my hand lettering and how to do it, and if you don't feel like you're artistic enough to do it, you don't need to be a great hand letterer. You could use stamps, you could use stickers, or you could just use your normal handwriting. So today I'm just kind of using my own little scribbly, half cursive, half print, just writing out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. So again, that verse is John 7, 37 through 38. So I'm using my Tombow Funosuke brush pen to do this, but I'm just using the very tip of it, and I'm not applying any pressure so that it's basically just kind of like a monoline pen. You could also use a micron pen to create the same look. But I had the Funosuke right next to me, and it doesn't bleed through at all. So, all right, that's it for my page. I'll go ahead and show you the backside really quick. You can see that there is no bleed through from the supplies that I used. I don't ever have bleed through with my basic supplies. And again, I'll put the links to the supplies that I used, as well as the free printable outline sketch of the waterfall and anything else you need to create a page just like this in the blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor waterfall. And I did not prep my page with gesso or anything as well. So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for sticking along to this 20-minute video. I hope that you enjoyed it. All right, much love and many blessings. Bye.